The champagne flutes were already arranged on silver trays when I decided to destroy my son's wedding. Not my biological son. I should clarify that from the start. Jason came into our lives 23 years ago, a 5-year-old boy with haunted eyes and bruised knees, abandoned at a fire station with nothing but a torn backpack and a note that said his mother couldn't do it anymore. David and I had been trying for years to have children of our own, and when the social worker called us, something in her voice told me this was meant to be. We loved him like our own. Better than our own, maybe, because we chose him deliberately, consciously, with full knowledge of what we were taking on. But standing in the kitchen of my modest suburban home that Tuesday morning, staring at the catering invoice Jason had forwarded me, not as a courtesy, but as a demand for payment, I realized that love hadn't been enough. Or perhaps it had been too much. The invoice was itemized with military precision. Dover sole for 200 guests. Hand-rolled sushi stations, a 7-tier cake from that bakery in Manhattan that required a 6-month waiting list. The total made my hands shake. Not because David and I couldn't afford it, we'd saved carefully over the years, but because of the note Jason had added at the bottom. Transfer the full amount by Friday. Victoria's parents are covering the venue and flowers, so this is the least you can do. And Mom, don't embarrass me by wearing anything too dated. Victoria's family is very fashion-forward. I read it 3 times before I fully absorbed the casual cruelty of it. The coffee maker gurgled behind me, and I heard David's footsteps on the stairs. He'd been up late again, working on the speech he planned to give at the reception. The father of the groom's speech that Jason hadn't officially asked him to deliver, but that David was preparing anyway, because that's who my husband was. Hopeful, devoted, blind to what our son had become. "Morning, Liz." David kissed my cheek, then frowned at my expression. "What's wrong?" I handed him my phone without a word. His face went through several transformations as he read. Confusion, hurt, anger, and finally that terrible resignation I'd been seeing more often lately. He set the phone down carefully on the counter as if it might explode. "He's just stressed about the wedding," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You know how Jason gets when he's under pressure." "David." I turned to face him fully, taking in the grey in his beard that hadn't been there when we first brought Jason home, the lines around his eyes that deepened every time our son disappointed us. "We need to talk about this. Really talk about it." "Talk about what? That our son is getting married and wants everything perfect? That's normal. Normal would be gratitude. Normal would be including us in the planning instead of sending invoices like we're vendors. Normal would be..." I stopped, fighting to keep my voice steady. "When's the last time he called just to talk? Not to ask for money or connections, or to use our lake house for some business retreat?" David opened his mouth, then closed it. We both knew the answer. The truth was, Jason had been pulling away for years. Ever since he'd graduated from the university David and I had paid for and landed that job at the investment firm downtown. Each promotion seemed to widen the distance between us. The expensive suits replaced the jeans and hoodies we'd bought him in high school. The luxury sedan replaced the sensible Toyota we'd given him for college graduation. And somehow, in acquiring all these markers of success, he'd shed the humility and kindness we'd tried so hard to instill. "Maybe we should visit him this week," David suggested, grasping at anything. "Take him to lunch, just the 3 of us. Talk things through before the wedding." I almost agreed. Almost let myself believe that one more conversation, one more attempt at connection would make a difference. But then, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma, my closest friend since college, and everything changed. "Lisa, I need to talk to you ASAP. It's about Jason. Call me." I excused myself and dialed her number, stepping into the living room where David couldn't hear. Emma answered on the first ring. "Thank God," she breathed. "I've been debating whether to tell you this all night, but I can't keep quiet anymore. You need to know what Jason's been saying about you and David." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "My nephew Peter works at Jason's firm. Same department. He's been hearing things. Lisa, Jason's been telling people he's basically self-made. That you and David were just temporary guardians who helped out a little, but that he succeeded despite, not because of his circumstances. The words hit like physical blows. That's not true. I know it's not true. But that's not even the worst part. Emma's voice dropped. Peter heard Jason talking to his fiancée's father last week. He said that you and David won't be sitting at the head table at the wedding, that you're not important enough for the family photos, that Victoria's family deserves the spotlight because they're, quote, real family. The room tilted. I gripped the back of the couch to steady myself. Lisa, are you still there? I'm here. My voice sounded far away, hollow. Does Peter have any proof? Anything concrete? He's been documenting things. He thinks what Jason's doing is wrong, and honestly, I think he's looking for a reason to take Jason down a peg at work. Apparently, Jason's not well liked among the junior staff. Too arrogant, too quick to claim credit for other people's work. Can you ask Peter to send me what he has? Already done. Check your email. I thanked Emma and ended the call, my hands shaking as I opened my laptop. The email was waiting, and its contents made me feel physically ill. Screenshots of Jason's messages to colleagues, bragging about how he'd managed his adoptive parents' expectations and convinced them to pay for the wedding while keeping them properly in the background. A recording Peter had made of Jason telling someone at a company happy hour that he was embarrassed by how middle-class David and I were, that Victoria's family was old money and sophistication, everything his starter family hadn't been. Starter family. I'd given that boy, that man now, everything. Every soccer practice and parent-teacher conference. Every late-night emergency room visit when he had nightmares so bad he'd hyperventilate. Every college application essay I'd helped him revise. Every interview I'd coached him through. David had taught him to drive, to change a tire, to negotiate a salary. We'd been there for every milestone, every stumble, every triumph. And we were his starter family. David found me an hour later, still at the laptop, my face wet with tears I didn't remember crying. Lisa. He crouched beside me, his hand on my shoulder. What happened? I showed him everything, watched as my husband's face crumpled as 23 years of love and sacrifice confronted the ugly reality of who Jason had become. He can't mean this, David whispered. He's just trying to impress Victoria's family. Once the wedding's over, once they're settled, he'll remember. Remember what? I turned to him, and something in my chest was hardening, crystallizing into something sharp and clear. Remember that we loved him. He knows that, David. He's counting on it. He knows we'll keep quiet, keep paying, keep accepting whatever crumbs of affection he tosses our way because we're too invested to walk away. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm done being taken for granted. I'm done being embarrassed of. I'm done being treated like hired help by someone we raised as our son. I stood up, decision solidifying with each word. I'm going to talk to Victoria. David's eyes widened. Lisa, you can't. Can't what? Tell her the truth? That Jason's been lying about his past, about us, about everything? She deserves to know who she's marrying. But the wedding is in 10 days. Exactly. The look on David's face was pure panic, but underneath I saw something else. Relief, maybe. Or hope. He'd been watching Jason's transformation with the same growing horror I had, but he'd been too afraid to acknowledge it, too afraid that speaking our doubts aloud would make them real. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was furious. It took me 3 days to arrange a meeting with Victoria. I'd only met her twice before, once at a stiff dinner where Jason had kept steering the conversation away from any topic related to his childhood, and once at a charity gala where she'd been polite but distant, clearly coached on how to interact with the adoptive parents without seeming too familiar. She agreed to meet me for coffee at a cafe in the financial district, probably assuming I wanted to discuss some last-minute wedding detail. She looked stunning even in business casual, honey blonde hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, Minimal makeup that somehow made her skin glow. A silk blouse that probably cost more than my entire outfit. "Mrs. Richardson," she greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "This is a surprise. Jason mentioned you might have questions about the seating chart." "Not exactly." I sat down across from her, my coffee untouched. "Victoria, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. What has Jason told you about his childhood?" Confusion flickered across her face. His childhood? Well, he's mentioned that he grew up in Connecticut, that his parents, your family, helped him out when his biological parents couldn't care for him. He's always been a bit private about the details. "Helped him out," I repeated slowly. "Is that the phrase he used?" "I think so. Why? Is something wrong?" I pulled out my phone and opened the folder Emma had sent me. "Victoria, I'm going to show you some things, and I need you to look at them carefully. After you do, we can talk about whether something is wrong." She hesitated, then took my phone. I watched her face as she scrolled through the screenshots, the messages, the recording that Peter had transcribed. Her expression moved from confusion to shock to something harder to read, anger, maybe, or hurt. "This can't be right," she said finally, but her voice wavered. "Jason wouldn't. He's always spoken so highly of his independence, his drive. His independence that David and I paid for. His drive that we supported through every setback and doubt." I kept my voice level, factual. "We didn't just help out when his biological parents couldn't cope. We adopted him legally at age 5. We raised him as our son. We paid for his education, his first car, the security deposit on his first apartment. We were there for every single milestone of his life." Victoria set my phone down carefully. "Why would he lie about this?" "I think you know why." She flinched. "My family can be. We have high expectations, standards. Jason knew he'd need to present himself a certain way. And David and I don't fit that presentation." Silence stretched between us. A barista called out drink orders, someone laughed too loudly at a nearby table, but Victoria and I sat in our bubble of uncomfortable truth. "I need to think about this," she said finally. "I need to talk to Jason." "Of course." I stood up, leaving my coffee untouched. "But Victoria? Before you marry someone, you should know who they really are. And more importantly, you should know if they're capable of erasing the people who loved them most." I walked out of the cafe with my hands shaking but my spine straight. Phase 1 complete. Jason showed up at our house that evening, his BMW screeching into the driveway at nearly 8 o'clock. I'd been expecting him. Victoria had clearly confronted him immediately, but I hadn't expected the fury radiating off him as he stormed through our front door without knocking. "What the hell did you say to Victoria?" He didn't bother with greetings, didn't acknowledge David rising from his armchair in surprise. "She's threatening to postpone the wedding because of some bullshit you fed her about me being ashamed of you." "I didn't feed her anything," I said calmly, remaining seated on the couch. "I showed her the messages you've been sending your colleagues, the ones where you call us your starter family and complain about how embarrassing we are." Jason's face went white, then red. "You had no right." "No right?" Now I stood up, and I let every ounce of hurt and betrayal fuel my words. I had no right to defend myself against being erased, to tell the truth about who raised you, who loved you, who gave you everything you used as a foundation to build this life you're so desperate to be ashamed of. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Victoria's family expects— I don't care what Victoria's family expects. My voice cut across his excuses like a knife. I care that the boy we raised, the boy we loved as our own son, has turned into a man who treats his parents like they're embarrassing obstacles to be managed. David stepped forward and I saw my own pain reflected in his face. "Jason, we've given you everything. Not just money, though God knows we've given you plenty of that. We gave you a home when you had none, a family when you were alone, love when you desperately needed it. And this is how you repay us?" "I didn't ask you to adopt me," Jason snapped, And the words fell like stones into the room. For a moment, none of us breathed. "You're right," I said quietly. "You didn't ask. You were 5 years old and traumatized and abandoned. You didn't ask for anything except maybe for someone to make you feel safe. And we did that. We gave you that. Not because you asked, but because you needed it, and because we wanted to. And now you're holding it over my head. We're not holding anything over your head." David's voice was steady but hard. "We're simply refusing to disappear because our existence inconveniences you." Jason ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when he was frustrated. "You don't know what it's like. Victoria's father is one of the most connected men in the city. Her family has expectations about breeding, background, connections. If they knew I came from what?" I demanded. "From love. From a family that chose you deliberately, that fought for you, that stood by you through every challenge. If that's something to be ashamed of, then Victoria's family has seriously warped values." "You're middle class," Jason said bluntly. "You live in a tract home in Connecticut. You drive a 10-year-old Camry. Victoria's family has a box at the Met and a house in the Hamptons. Can you honestly not see how those things don't mesh?" The casual snobbery in his voice, the reduction of our entire lives to property values and cultural capital, was breathtaking in its cruelty. "Get out," David said quietly. Jason blinked. "What?" "Get out of our house." David's voice was still quiet, but it carried absolute authority. "Right now, and don't come back until you're ready to apologize. Actually apologize, not just smooth things over." "You can't be serious." "He's completely serious," I said. "And so am I. We've spent 23 years putting you first, making sacrifices for you, loving you unconditionally. We're done accepting being treated like we're an embarrassment." Jason's face cycled through several emotions: shock, anger, calculation. I could see him trying to figure out how to manipulate the situation, how to charm or threaten his way back into control. But David and I stood united. And something in our stance must have communicated that this time was different. "Fine," Jason said finally. "But don't think this changes anything. Victoria and I are getting married, and you two will show up when and where I tell you to, because you won't want to miss your only son's wedding." "Only son," I repeated. "You mean the only son we chose, raised, and loved? The one who's currently treating us like hired help?" "Think very carefully, Jason," David added, "about whether you want to walk into that wedding, knowing that at any moment, people might learn the truth about how you've treated the people who raised you." It was the closest we'd come to an actual threat, and Jason's eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't dare try us," I said softly. Jason left, but not before slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. David and I stood in the sudden silence, holding hands, both of us shaking. "Did we just make things worse?" David asked. "I don't think they could get worse." The next few days passed in tense silence. No calls from Jason, no texts, nothing. I half expected him to show up with flowers and apologies. That had always been his pattern when he'd messed up as a teenager, but apparently he was doubling down on his position. Victoria called me on Thursday, her voice small and uncertain. "Mrs. Richardson, could we meet again? Just the two of us?" We met at the same cafe, but this time Victoria looked exhausted, her perfect composure cracked around the edges. She ordered a double espresso and drank half of it before speaking. "I've been doing some digging," she said finally, "talking to people who know Jason, asking questions I should have asked months ago. And I'm starting to realize that the man I fell in love with might not be the man I'm about to marry." She looked up at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. He lied to me about so many things: his background, his relationship with you and David, even some of his professional accomplishments. I talked to Peter, your friend's nephew, and he confirmed that Jason has been taking credit for other people's work, positioning himself as more successful than he really is. Victoria, I wanted to believe him so badly. Her voice broke. My parents have always been so critical, so demanding. When I met Jason, he seemed perfect. Ambitious, sophisticated, self-made. Everything they wanted for me. I didn't question it because I wanted it to be true. What are you going to do? She was quiet for a long moment. I'm going to postpone the wedding. Maybe cancel it entirely. I can't marry someone I don't really know, someone who's capable of erasing the people who loved him most. Relief and sadness warred in my chest. Relief that Victoria was smart enough to see the truth. Sadness that this was how it had to end. For what it's worth, I said, I think you're making the right choice. Will you— Victoria hesitated. Will you tell me about him? The real him? Who he was before he became whoever he is now? So I did. I told her about the scared 5-year-old who used to check every night to make sure David and I were still there, still committed to keeping him. About the teenager who'd struggled with math until David spent months patiently tutoring him. About the college student who'd called me in tears after his first major failure, certain he'd let us down. He was capable of such love, I said. Such loyalty and kindness. I don't know when that changed or why. Maybe it was always there underneath and success just gave him permission to show it. Or maybe we failed him somehow in teaching him what really matters. You didn't fail him, Victoria said firmly. He failed you. The wedding was supposed to happen on Saturday. Instead, Victoria sent out cancellation notices on Wednesday morning. The official story was that she needed more time to be sure, that they were postponing rather than cancelling. But everyone knew what that meant. Jason called me at 11 p.m. Wednesday night, and I almost didn't answer. But David nodded at me, and I picked up. I hope you're happy, Jason said, his voice thick with rage or tears or both. You destroyed my relationship. You ruined everything I'd built. We destroyed nothing, I said wearily. We told the truth, that's all. If the truth was enough to end your relationship, maybe you should examine why. Victoria said you told her about when I was a kid, about the nightmares and the problems and all of it. You had no right to share that. I shared who you really were, who you came from. The journey you took to become the man you are now. If you're ashamed of that journey, that's your problem, not mine. I'm not ashamed. He stopped. I just wanted a different life. Is that so wrong? I wanted to be someone impressive, someone people respected. And you thought you had to erase us to do that, I said quietly. That's what hurts, Jason. Not that you wanted success or status or whatever it is you've been chasing, but that you thought our love was something to be hidden, that the people who raised you were embarrassments to be managed. Silence stretched across the line. I don't know how to fix this, he said finally, and he sounded young again, uncertain, like the boy he'd been. I don't know either, I admitted, but I know it starts with being honest, with Victoria, with yourself, with us. And it probably starts with figuring out why our love wasn't enough, why you needed to trade it in for people who valued you for all the wrong reasons. What if I've ruined everything? Then you live with that, David said. I hadn't realized I'd put the phone on speaker until he spoke. And you learn from it. And maybe, eventually, you become the man we always believed you could be. The man you were before you decided that kindness and loyalty were weaknesses. Jason was crying now. I could hear it in his breathing. I'm sorry. I know I've been awful. I got caught up in everything and I thought. We know, I said, cutting him off gently. We know what you thought, but Jason, we can't fix this for you. We've spent 23 years fixing things for you, smoothing paths, making life easier. This time, you have to do the work. You have to figure out who you want to be. Will you— His voice cracked. Will you forgive me? I looked at David, saw my own complicated mix of love and hurt and exhaustion reflected in his face. Maybe, I said finally. Someday. But not until you've proven you understand what you did wrong. Not until you've made amends not just to us, but to Victoria, to Peter, to everyone you've hurt while climbing your ladder. And if I do that, if I fix things, Then we'll talk. But Jason, no more demands, no more expectations that will just fall in line. If you want us in your life, you treat us with respect. Real respect, not management. He agreed, said goodbye, and hung up. David and I sat in the silence afterward, holding hands in the dark kitchen. Do you think he'll actually change? David asked. I don't know, I said honestly. But we've done all we can. The rest is up to him. It's been 6 months since that phone call. Jason did break things off with Victoria permanently. She'd moved on to someone else, someone whose past didn't require excavation to understand. Jason moved to a smaller apartment, started therapy, and has been slowly reaching out. He came to dinner last month, and for the first time in years, he seemed genuinely present. He asked about our lives instead of talking about his. He helped with dishes without being asked. He met my eyes when he apologized. I've been thinking about that night, he said as we sat on the porch afterward, drinking coffee. When you kicked me out, I was so angry, but you were right. I'd become someone I didn't recognize, someone you didn't raise me to be. What changed? David asked. Losing Victoria was part of it. But mostly, he paused, choosing words carefully. Mostly it was realizing that all the things I thought made me successful, the job, the money, the right connections, none of it mattered if I lost the people who actually knew me, who loved me even when I was broken. You were never broken, I said quietly. You were hurt. There's a difference. Yeah. He smiled, and it was the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in years. I'm starting to understand that. We're not all the way healed. Maybe we never will be. Some betrayals leave scars that don't fully fade, but we're talking, really talking, for the first time in years. And Jason seems to finally understand that love isn't something to be managed or manipulated or hidden away when it's inconvenient. He asked last week if he could bring someone to dinner next month. Not a fiancé. He's being careful about relationships now, taking time to know people before committing. Just someone he's dating, someone he wants us to meet. I'd like that, I said. But Jason, I want to meet the real you, not the version you think we want to see. I know, he said. I'm working on it. But Mom, the real me, I think he's someone you'd actually like, someone closer to who I used to be. Maybe that's true. Maybe Jason will find his way back to the boy we raised, the one capable of deep love and loyalty and kindness. Or maybe he'll become someone new, someone who integrates both his ambition and his heart. Either way, David and I will be here, not as the starter family to be outgrown, not as embarrassing obstacles to be managed, but as the people who chose him, who loved him, who will always be his parents, whether that fits into his perfect image or not. And that, I've learned, is enough. Not because Jason has earned our love, love isn't something you earn, but because we choose to give it anyway, on our terms now, with boundaries and self-respect intact. The wedding that never was taught me something crucial, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be erased, that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary, and that the people who truly matter will respect you more for demanding respect than they ever would for accepting scraps. David and I are stronger now, our marriage deeper for having weathered this storm together. And Jason, well, Jason is learning that success without integrity is hollow, that connections without genuine care are meaningless, that the people who loved you when you had nothing are worth more than all the status in the world. It's a lesson that came at a steep price. A wedding that never happened, a relationship destroyed, a family nearly broken beyond repair. But perhaps it's also a lesson worth learning, even if the cost seemed unbearable at the time. And somewhere I hope Victoria found someone who values her for who she is, not for who her family is. Someone who doesn't need to erase his past to build his future. As for us, we're still here, still in our tract home in Connecticut, Still driving that Camry. Still middle class and proud of it. Still the people who loved a broken little boy and raised him to be a man, even when that man forgot for a while where he came from. But he's remembering now, slowly, painfully, imperfectly. And we're here to witness it, to support it, to love him through it, because that's what parents do. Real parents. The kind who don't give up even when giving up would be easier. The kind Jason once had, lost, and is now finding his way back to.